I hope everybody had a chance to go camping this summer. As fall and winter come upon us, it might just be too cold for people to safely do that at the moment. Welcome back to the swamp, my friends. It's good to see you made it back for another video. In this episode, we're going to be sharing some creepy and allegedly true stories sent in by viewers just like you, who claim to have had some pretty creepy camping experiences. If you have a camping story, or a story in general that you would like to share with the swamp, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. Now, without further ado, sit back, relax, and get ready for some allegedly true and creepy camping horror stories. When I was 16, I and my friends went on a camping trip. For privacy, I'll call my friends A, J, and T. Anyway, on to the story. We had been planning this trip for a while, and we were very excited about it. A was the first to show up at my house. We got her stuff loaded into my car and waited for the guys to show up. An hour later, the guys arrived and we left. When we got to the campsite, we parked and unloaded the car and got our tent set up. A and I set up our tent close to the car, while the boys set up closer to the tree line. We spent the day talking and laughing about random BS, and when it started to get dark, T and I got the fire started and A and J made dinner. After dinner, we decided to go for a nighttime hike, which we would later regret. We were about halfway into our hike when I started hearing odd sounds behind me. At first, I asked if my friends were messing with me or heard anything. At first, it sounded like it all started, and then my friend started hearing a crunching noise, like something being eaten. We shined our lights in the direction of where we thought the sound was coming from, and what we saw was absolutely horrifying. In the light of our flashlight, we saw a half-eaten deer hanging upside down from a branch with its intestines spilling out and a massive puddle of blood underneath it. We immediately sprinted back to our campsite and went into our tents for the night, though none of us got much sleep. The next day, nobody said a word. We didn't really care to. Looking back, we should have just packed up and left, but we were dumb teenagers. When nighttime came, we made dinner and went to bed once again. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night to hear a low growling sound and leaves crunching. I tried to wake up A as quietly as I could, when all of a sudden I heard T scream bloody murder. Apparently, he had gotten out of the tent to go pee, and he saw a massive humanoid thing lurking next to A and mine's tent. He said it was at least 7 feet tall, but when he screamed, the thing ran into the woods. After it was gone, T woke up J, and we packed up everything and tore out of there. T then explained what he had seen. Nobody said a word for the rest of the drive. We're 25 years old now, and we haven't said anything about this trip since, and I don't think any of us plan to. Hello, Swamp Dweller. I hope this finds you well. I have a story I would love to know what I shot at. But before I get to that, it is important that I state that I want my name and location kept private, since I am in active military service in a special operations unit in South Africa. Anyways, on to the story. My unit was deployed domestically to the mountainous regions of the Western Cape for a live fire training course. Basically, it's more of a wilderness surviving training exercise, as we did not really expect to fire our weapons except to hunt for food, as we only had a limited amount of food and water for a 2-month survival course. My unit consisted of 6 men. For privacy reasons, I will not state our names, but for this, we will name them by number, Charlie 2 to Charlie 6, and myself. The first few days went smoothly. We found a freshwater area, set up camp, and set a perimeter. A 2-man patrol and guard team was set up as well to patrol it at night. On the 4th night, we started hearing odd noises coming from the west of our position. Now, I feel it is pretty important that I describe our location a little bit. The way we were set up in camp was our backs were to our tents. There was a lift maybe 100 or 150 feet high, so there is nothing that can approach from the south. To the east was a river, maybe 50 feet across, some 70 feet from the tents. North was nothing but thick trees as far as the eye can see, and the same to the west. Now, the noise I heard was something like a howl, but not quite. It sounded more like a human or something imitating a howl. We thought nothing of it because it just could have been a dog or something like that. The fifth night got strange. It was somewhere around midnight, and me and Charlie 5, my best friend and second in command, were on patrol when we heard a baby cry. Now, we thought this was very odd, so we decided to investigate. We walked about 2 miles from camp and it got louder. About 5 yards away from us, there was a huge rock, and Charlie 5 and I swore we saw something behind it. Now, this was no man. Whatever this thing was, it had glowing red eyes. So we raised our highly modified rifles, fully automatic AR-15s, loaded with 7 .62 rounds. We rounded the rock at an angle so we can see around it, and as we peeked around it, we saw whatever this thing was. It looked like what people describe on your channel as a dog man. But it wasn't quite the same. This thing was massive. Now, I'm pretty close to 7 feet tall, but this thing had to be at least twice that, if not more. It had teeth the size of a kitchen knife, and hair, which was long and pitch black. Its mouth looked like something that you might describe a Wendigo to have. It was almost as if it didn't have any lips and only bared teeth. It had a bony, dog-like snout as well. Now, we did not stop to ask what this thing was. We just opened fire. Both of us fired a mag of 30 rounds into this thing, and it seemingly did not flinch at all. With no time to reload, Charlie 5 switched to a Desert Eagle, which is an impractical weapon in my opinion, but he never went anywhere without it. He fired twice at this thing's head, and it barely even winced. I even loaded my grenade launcher attachment and fired. This made it run off. We did not stick around for long and hauled our asses back to camp. The rest of the guys met us halfway, and I just yelled for them to follow us. They did, and we explained to them what we have seen, but nobody believed us. So if anyone can tell me what the heck I shot at that night, I'd greatly appreciate it. Because we have no idea, and we kind of think we're going nuts. Is Dogman living in South Africa? It was summer right after I graduated from high school. A good friend and I decided to try our hand at camping. We grew up in the greater Los Angeles area, so our knowledge of the great outdoors was nothing beyond that of a couple years we had in Cub Scouts. In other words, we had almost no idea what we were doing. We packed a tent, a couple of sleeping bags, supplies, etc., and headed off in our car. Just to note that I grew up in the 80s, so this is a time before the wide prevalence of cell phones and the existence of other portable digital devices. We drove north on 395 for about 6 hours, and then headed westward into the mountains around Inyo Canyon. First mistake. We really did not plan which place to camp. We played it by ear, like fools. Second mistake. We left in mid-afternoon, and it was pitch black darkness when we arrived in the general area. We had driven off the main road and onto a dirt road to find a spot to camp. The dust from driving on the dirt road overwhelmed the headlight beams when we finally decided to pull over and to set up camp. It was around 2300 hours around this time, and we were exhausted and famished. Any place was a good spot to camp for us, given our only reason to do so at that point was our hunger and exhaustion. This was our third mistake. We did not bring flashlights. We only had Bic lighters for our cigarettes. We tried to set up the tent using our lighters and the headlights of the car, which was parked about 10 to 15 feet away. The wind was blowing, so the lighter constantly went out after just a few seconds, either directly because of the wind or indirectly because the wind would push the flame into our thumb. Clearly, we were being complete and utter idiots. We finished setting up the tent, but at that point I was too tired to eat. My friend managed to make some instant ramen. We smoked a cigarette in the car, then crashed out in the tent. We awoke to a very cold morning. It must have been around 5:30. Immediately upon exiting the tent, we realized that we were camped in the entrance of a hiking trail. There were at least 2 no camping signs in visible distance from us. We dismantled the tent, cleaned up, and cleared out. That morning we ended up buying some cheap flashlights and a nice hot meal in a small town. It was hardly a town, but more like a few storefronts and shops on a main road, about the length of an average city block. We went into some office, though I do not recall exactly what it was. It might have been a park ranger station or the office headquarters for a campground. In any case, we found and reserved a site for the night. The campground was basically a large circle with campsites along its outer circumference, with each campsite being about 50 yards from its neighbor. In the middle of the circle was a common bathroom and a shower. We circled around it once, and I think we saw one family that was all set up with a tent and a camper. We found our spot and set up camp, which was quite far from them. That night was when we had a creepy encounter. My friend and I were laying there in the tent, shining our flashlight upwards and chatting. Our new flashlights eventually gave out. Yes, broken. Our fire pit was about 6 feet from the opening of our tent, and it was just glowing embers at this point. We probably should have completely put it out, and we probably should not have had the tent so close. In any case, there we were, chatting away and having a good time. My friend began to be distracted by his foot. After the 3rd or 4th time he got up to check his foot, I asked him what was wrong. He told me that something is tapping his foot from outside the tent. His foot was against the side of the tent, so from the outside, you would have to be able to see a bulge in the tent. It was as if pebbles were being thrown at his foot through the tent. There it is again, what the hell? Each time it happened, there was a sound, like pebbles or a light tap. We sort of laughed it off, assuming that it was a twig or grass moving around, and perhaps a loose strap on the outside of the tent. I do not recall exactly how it happened at first, but I do remember we suddenly became silent at the same time. A sound came to be audible to the both of us. Footsteps, slowly moving towards our tent. We wondered if it was a bear or an other non-human animal, but it seemed distinctly bipedal. They were terribly slow and measured, like every step was 2 seconds or so between each other. I finally said, in a whisper, "Someone's coming." My friend did not move. His face had an expression of pure fear. At some point, my friend bolted up and said, "F this." He grabbed his pipe, stuffed it full of pot, and took the biggest, deepest drags I have ever seen a person take. About a minute later, he was out. Drugs are not really my thing, so I was alone in the tent as far as conscious bodies are concerned. I was sitting up at this point, and I had taken out the only weapon I had, a Swiss Army pocket knife. I took out the biggest blades, but, it's really not going to help. I also took out the ice pick in the middle and held it like some ridiculous melee weapon. I could see the glowing embers in the fire pit through the sheer nylon material of our tent, and I was able to roughly, but barely discern some of the rocks around it. I watched and listened intently. The footsteps came closer, and at the same slow pace. With each step, I could hear the dirt and rocks underfoot crunching and grinding. At some point, it was clear to me that whoever, or whatever, was standing between the tent and the fire pit, in my fuzzy line of sight, was not human. The footsteps stopped right at the front of the tent, about 6 to 8 inches away. No more than 4, if I had to guess. From the entrance of the tent, it was silent for about 1 minute, and then I heard a click. At the same time, I clearly saw through the nylon wall a flashlight turn on. I was able to not just see the flashlight, but the outline of the hand doing it. The flashlight was shining on the zipper. Just inches from the zipper, blood drained out of my head, and my palms instantly began to drip in sweat. I yelled, "Who's there?" There was some fear in my voice, but it was most aggressive in tone. Whoever it was, the person immediately turned off their flashlight. I did not move, but neither did they. The person just stood there inches from the tent's entrance. My friend is out, totally unaware of what is going on. I pretended that he was still awake and whispered just loud enough to be audible to our visitor. "Yes, it's loaded. There's one in the chamber." As if my friend were awake and asked me about our gun. Fourth mistake. We did not have a gun, or any real weapon of self-defense for that matter. It felt like an eternity, but after sitting still for at least 10 minutes, I heard feet slowly turning in the dirt, then slowly walking away from the tent. I stayed up the whole night, and it was not until the light of dawn came through the tent that I crashed out. The heat inside the tent woke us up, and it was near noon by this point. We went outside to inspect the site but found nothing missing. However, we did find boot prints leading away from our campsite and outside the campground. That was the last time I camped in a tent in a public campground. Hey swamp folk, let's take a quick break away from these creepy camping stories to talk about our sponsor today, HelloFresh. HelloFresh offers convenient, no-contact delivery to your doorstep for easy, home cooking with the family. The recipes are easy to follow with simple steps and pictures to guide you along the way. HelloFresh cuts out that stressful meal planning and grocery store trip. I've been using HelloFresh for almost a year now. I really enjoy this service. Honestly, when the pandemic hit, I really didn't want to have to go out as much. So I started trying this service, and I absolutely love it. You can even save up to 40% when you use HelloFresh versus shopping in the grocery store. HelloFresh is delicious and nutritious. It delivers fresh, high-quality pre-portioned ingredients so you can make meals that are delicious and nutritious. Over 90% of the ingredients are sourced directly from growers to ensure peak flavor and ripeness. HelloFresh offers more than 20 chef-crafted, delicious options every single week to help you break out of your recipe rut, try new things, and make any night feel special. HelloFresh is the first global carbon-neutral meal kit company. By skipping the grocery store and using HelloFresh, you're reducing your food waste by at least 25%. HelloFresh is completely flexible for your lifestyle. You can easily change your delivery days or meal plan preferences and skip a week whenever you need. Keep your fridge stocked by adding extra meals or additional proteins, quick meals like breakfast on the go or their 10-minute lunches, and even desserts to satisfy that sweet tooth. HelloFresh is also committed to giving back. So far in 2020, they've already donated 3.5 million meals to people who are in need. You can help too with HelloFresh's Beyond the Box program, where you give nutritious meals to those experiencing food insecurity with just a couple of clicks in the app. I myself have given out plenty of free boxes, and I plan to do more so in the future. Thank you again to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. Be sure to go to hellofresh.com/swamped90 and use code SWAMPED90 to get $90 off, including free shipping. Again, go to hellofresh.com/swamped90 and use code SWAMPED90 to get $90 off, including free shipping. I just wanted to send this into your show. I'm trying to figure out what I saw and heard. It actually happened earlier today. It's almost 7 a.m., and we had just come home from a fishing and camping trip. We were only about 10 minutes away from our house on a river. Usually, the river is low enough that you can try to walk across the sandbars, but it just finished raining a good bit, so the waters were a bit high. We had ourselves set up right under the overpass, right at the water. We'd been there since around 4 a.m. this morning, with just headlamps and a big light, like one of those spotlight flashlights, so we could kind of see the edge of the other side of the river a bit. It was quiet when we got there. A bit of morning traffic over us, so sometimes it was pretty loud under there, but we kept hearing the brush moving around, and we thought it was raccoons. because a while back we had seen some, but we couldn't hear what was happening over the cars. It was like it was going back and forth on the other side of the bank, these loud cracks and crunching sounds. We could kind of see the brush and growth on our side because of the lamps and the street lamps up top, but not the other side of the river. We didn't start freaking out till the sound started non-stop, and we were pretty sure it was the other side of the river, but we heard splashes and thought something was trying to cross. So, my stepdad tried to move the big light in the water so we could try to see what was there. And then, on the far bank, we saw the undergrowth shaking and moving around in front of us. We thought there was a deer. At least, that's what it looked like. We haven't seen deer in months. They don't come to this close to the highway all that often. We just put the light on it and watch it. It stopped moving around and was watching us. This doe just started splashing the water with its hooves, like it wasn't sure if it could go in or what. It was jerking its head up and down violently hard, like it would put its head and neck near the ground and then pull it back up again, over and over. Then my dad started yelling at it to try to spook it away, because, quite frankly, it was freaking us out. It started this shrill moaning sound. I don't really know how to describe it. It was just unnatural. It was like a high-pitched shrieking, kind of like a mountain lion, but different. It was an urgent, agitated sound. We could hear it all over the traffic. It was so loud, I just can't explain it. This thing was trying to come into the water. We dropped our poles and turned around and got in the car. My stepdad swears if it was rabid, he's never seen anything like that. I'm personally superstitious. I don't know what we saw. I tried to explain to my fiance when I got home, but even he didn't know. I think we saw a skinwalker though. I've seen sick deer before. I've never seen or heard a deer like that though. I hope I don't, ever again. I'm sorry if the story is a bit jumbled, I'm a bit shaken up, but I would really like any suggestions as to what we could have seen. I live in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in northeast Georgia. It's a beautiful area with hundreds of miles of national forest, some great state parks, and tons of fantastic camping places. Unfortunately, my hometown is also relatively poor. While there are some out-of-town residents from Atlanta and other places, a lot of people where I live are really poor. I do freelance work as a technical writer, so I can do most of my work online. If I didn't have that going for me, I'd have to move somewhere else. It's just one of those small towns that will rob you of your ability to accomplish anything in life if you stay there too long, without anything else going for you at least. Excluding a handful of doctors and lawyers and Georgia Power Company employees, the only employment in the area is at Walmart, fast food, and a couple of grocery stores. To the east of my town, there is a massive national forest. It's loaded with great camping sites and lots of relatively unused hiking trails. I really enjoy hiking on them with my dog, but it can be a bit of an unnerving experience sometimes. It's about a 10-mile drive from my town, and there's no cell phone service or homes for miles. In the past, there have been a lot of vehicle break-ins at the trailheads. The gravel parking lots at some of them even glitter with bits of broken glass from what I'm guessing were car windows. Sometimes there are really, really shifty people hanging around these trailheads or just driving around on the Forest Service roads in general. These are really rough roads, and you'll see these beat-up $500 cars just barreling along roads meant for a 4x4. Some of the people you see in the cars look pretty close to that guy that got crushed by an ATM in Breaking Bad. All that being said, it's still a great place to camp. However, you just have to be careful. A few years ago, 2 of my friends and I decided to go play paintball in the national forest. Probably not legal, I know. We decided to turn the paintball expedition into a camping trip so we could play the next morning as well. After a pretty uneventful day of shooting paintballs at each other, we drive a couple of miles to one of the more popular camping spots. Unfortunately, a church group or something had taken up all the spots in the area. This was really the only camping spot that we were familiar with, and it was getting pretty late. So we decided to keep on looking. We drove for about an hour further and further into the woods. By this time, it's getting a bit dark, and we're getting a bit worried about finding a spot. We all had GPS on our smartphones, and none of us had any service. Go figure. We turn off onto an unfamiliar road that isn't in a very good shape. In fact, it looks like the Forest Service Rangers used a backhoe to block off the road with a mound of dirt. A broken metal barrier lay in the woods nearby. That said, it looked like 4x4 vehicles had been going over the mound, so it was pretty worn down. Our F-150 had pretty high clearance, so we decided to go over the mound. There was an old gravel road on the other side, and the road was pretty much clear of debris. We drove a few miles down this road and came across an opening next to a small creek. There were some blue tarps hanging around over a plywood table nailed to a tree, which seemed kind of odd. That said, it was pretty much dark at this point and we didn't want to keep driving around all night looking for a camping spot. We left the truck light running and we set up the tent. As we went setting up the tent, I started to notice that there were a lot of trash in the woods surrounding us. I see a green bottle lying on the ground. I look at the label and see that it was a bottle of home and garden insecticide. I was really tired at the time, and I just thought that someone had been out here dumping their home garbage or something. None of us thought it was weird that someone would be dumping garbage in an area that is more than an hour from the nearest home. We set up camp, had some beers, and made chili from scratch. By this time, it was probably around 11 p.m. As we were eating, we noticed a faint glow from the other side of a hill. At first, we tried to reason that it was the moonlight filtering its way through the trees. However, the angles didn't really make any sense. It didn't seem to be a bright light at all, and it wasn't moving. It was kind of like that glow you see over a bright city. We couldn't see the light source itself, though. Since there were no other access roads in the area that we knew of, we decided that it couldn't be other campers. The hill was about a quarter mile from our campsite, so we decided to go investigate. Now, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have done so. However, we all had a few rum and cokes in our stomachs, and two of us, Jacob and I, decided to take a look. My other friend Isaac decides to stay back and behind to pop some popcorn over the fire. We started walking towards the light source, and the situation gets even more strange. All of the trees in the area have their bark knocked off in a circle around their trunks. We thought it could have been the work of a beaver that lived in the creek, but it seemed very strange that a beaver would go around all of these trees and just knock the bark off in a circle. Jacob and I started to talk about the ghost beaver in pretty loud voices, probably due to our drunkenness. As we're almost on the top of the hill, Jacob tripped and yelled, "Ouch!" A few seconds after he yelled, the light, whatever it was, went out. We looked at each other and decided that maybe we don't need to see what that light was after all. We walk back in silence and keep looking back every few seconds, the feeling of being watched being more and more prominent. We decide to turn off our flashlight and just use the moonlight to get back to our campsite. When we get a couple of 100 feet away from the campsite, I can see my other friend Isaac walking around the campsite. He was wearing a hooded coat that I hadn't seen him wearing before. For some reason, he's carrying his paintball gun around in his hand. That seemed a bit odd. We said to each other, the fire started to die down, so we couldn't see our campsite as well. At this point, we'd probably been gone for almost an hour. From the distance, it looked like Isaac was looking for something. He kept walking around the site and was peering in the tent. When we were almost back to the campsite, we saw Isaac walk up on the road we came in on. We figured that he was going to use the bathroom and didn't want to wander through the woods like us. When we got back, we sat next to the fire and waited for Isaac to come back. All of a sudden, we see him lurch out of the tent. He stumbles a few feet and vomits. After we left, we had a few more rum and cokes. He mumbles. We asked him why he kept wandering around the campsite with a paintball gun, and he gets a strange look on his face. They're locked up in the cab of the truck, Did you unlock it? We go to check the truck, enter the door code, and see all of our paintball equipment we had left in it was still there. The keys to the truck were still hidden in a magnetic fob underneath. I get a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Isaac, what were you doing after we left? I ask. I was watching a movie on my phone. Then I fell asleep, I guess. But you were walking around with your paintball gun, right? Didn't you just change jackets? Isaac said he had been in the tent since we left, and that he had been wearing the same unhooded fleece all night. Someone had been walking around our campsite, and it wasn't Isaac. At this point, all of us are way too drunk to drive, but we decided to go ahead and pack up and go back to my house for the night. We don't bother packing up the tent. We just fold it down with the sleeping bags and everything in it. We jump into the F-150, and I start to drive out. When we get to the dirt hump, we see something gray blocking our path. The metal barrier that had been lying in the woods earlier is now back on its stand, right on the top of the hump. By this point, all of us has sobered up to the situation. No one wants to get out of the car to try to move the barrier. I had a metal guard on the front of the F-150, so I just drove forward slowly, tapping the metal barrier with the front of my truck. It falls right off. It must have been balanced on top. We drove over it slowly. We were terrified that it would pop one of the truck's tires as we drove over it, but it didn't. As we drove down the road, we see a vehicle following us with its lights off. It's probably 1,000 feet or so behind us, but we keep catching glimpses of it as the moon reflects off of it. I start to drive as fast as I can on the forest road, and the other vehicle keeps pace. It doesn't get any closer though. It just stays 1 or 2 turns behind us. We can only see it when the road straightens out. After about 45 minutes of speeding along gravel roads, we make it back to the main paved road. I start to drive everyone back to my house, but I decide to go a different way just to be safe. I didn't want to get pulled over for a DOI, and luckily I didn't. Camping can be fun, but very rural camping can be dangerous. I've driven past that metal barrier since, but it's always been back in place. I would never go down that road again though. Thanks for listening to these creepy and allegedly true camping horror stories. I don't know about you, but those Appalachian mountains always hold some downright creepy stories, and I'd love to hear some more from them. If you enjoyed these stories, please be sure to hit that like button. The more likes this video gets, the more YouTube promotes it in its algorithm. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. If you guys have a story that you would like to share, whether it's a camping story or just a story from the Appalachians like I said, I'd love to share them. Be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this show going on a daily basis. If you want to support the show, outside of hitting that like button and subscribing, maybe check out our merch store. I've got face masks, hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, and everything else you could want. It really helps out the channel and is very much appreciated. If you guys are on the go and don't have YouTube Premium, but still want to listen to your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories wherever you're at, you can do that for free on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and just about everywhere else you can download your favorite podcast. And the best part of it all is it's absolutely free. Thank you guys, as always, for the support that you give this show. I couldn't do this without you guys. Much love to HelloFresh. Be sure to go to hellofresh.com/swamped90 and use code swamped90 to save $90 and free shipping on your first order. Just saying from experience, I think you guys will really enjoy the service. I've been using it for quite a while and was pretty excited when they hit me up and said, hey, we would like to sponsor a video. So I hope you guys definitely take advantage of that offer. It's a really big offer. And yeah, see you guys soon with another creepy video.